Hey everybody, welcome back to Up the Vibe after a bit of a break from the world of podcasting. And today I'm welcoming back James Rose to discuss the release of Moment of Contact, to get the latest CE5 UK updates, to discuss the upcoming UFO report, and also our interview with Jim Penniston, who notably touched the craft during the Rendlesham UFO incident. Hi James, how are you doing today?
Hey Joe, great to see you. Yeah, very well, very well. Yeah, what a time we're living in at the moment.
I know
Incredible
this is
time.
non-stop. There's new things every day at the moment, isn't there? And not
Yeah.
least this Moment of Contact, which I saw not long ago, and it's quite compelling. And I messaged you after I saw it,
Yeah.
and so I wondered if what you thought of it.
Well, listen, to be totally honest and upfront, I have not seen it yet.
Yeah,
I must admit to being a little bit put off by some of. I made the mistake of looking at review. I mean, I don't these days. I don't look at reviews for films or books or anything. If I really want to see something, I'll just go and see it. And then after I've seen it and I've made my own opinion, I'll go and read the reviews. But for whatever reason, I didn't do that. I read the reviews. I think it was Mark Kaprowski in the Japanese in C5 community Japan sent me a couple of reviews and said, not sure about this. So I read those straight away, and it was just, I think we've had these conversations before. Although the court classifies things like hearsay as not admissible, there's still kind of relevant information. Now this would be very interesting for me because I've got an understanding of what happened in Varginha in Brazil. Not having seen the film, my understanding is built up from a couple of witnesses, one of whom was a doctor in the hospital who witnessed a being brought in. Another was one was a child, another witness was a child, another one was an adult from the village. So something crashed. There were one or two beings alive after the crash, and they brought one of those beings into a Brazilian hospital where one of the beings was treated by a Brazilian doctor who has been very brave in making a testament about this and stating categorically this was not human, that this being I saw. Is that correct?
So from the context of the film, what I remember was there is a doctor who took X-rays, and so this thing came in, and he took X-rays, and he was not allowed, and this is a first for him, not allowed to look at the X-rays, check them, make sure that it looked okay before they were stripped away, taken away by the military who brought this creature in. So that was one of the doctors, but he was more involved in the X-rays. In terms of the doctors that treated the being, and I understand there was two, one of which was still alive at the time and was being treated. I've not heard that that they've given testimony, and they didn't in the film, but I have heard that they still exist, or they're still alive.
The beings?
No,
Or the
the
witnesses?
doctors are still
Yeah,
alive.
yeah, yeah. That's
Will they come out? I think James Fox recently said on an interview that someone who was involved, actually might be more in the firemen or part of the police that were captured the being during one of the captures when it was running around Virginia, may have just recently popped up out of nowhere. So there may be something to that to hang on to. So we'll have to wait and see. It seems like there is a little bit of momentum gathering, and maybe someone out there who knows a bit more about this, has some video evidence or something, might be brave enough to come out. What was quite gripping, there's a bit in it with a guy called Eric. Forgotten the second name. There's a guy who they go and visit, and they turn up, and he literally says to them, if this is about the ETs, then I'm going to basically get off my property and I'll be leading you out with bullets. It's quite threatening. He said all this in Portuguese. And I actually remember on Twitter seeing the fallout from this, because I think you've gone on mute.
Sorry, Joe, repeat that.
Yeah, you're just on mute, but I was just saying that there was a part in the film, in the moment of contact, where they go up to a guy, I've forgotten his second name, Eric something, and he basically says to them, if this is about the ET, I'm going to lead you away with bullets. It was quite threatening. And so he was obviously quite scared. And James said he looked in his eyes and he's obviously got something, there's something in his mind he can't share, but it's weighing him down, his soul. And it's really, it was really touching to James just to feel how much emotional, how much emotion there is in the fear and everything, the trepidation to come out and talk about this incident by the various people, and the efforts that were put by the team to get people to come forward on this were pretty amazing. Just to give an indication of how much fear there is in the people who aren't coming out. So it kind of feels unsurprising that there isn't.
I mean, I think the big issue here is the fact that doctors globally are subject to, blanket regulation, and to a greater degree in every country, they're terrified of the regulators. I mean, the regulators can strip them of their ability to make money. So there's a justifiable fear there, but the problem is that is that takes over and replaces sort of a rational sense. I mean, in some senses, whistleblowing of any kind. Whenever you mention whistleblowing, the first thing you think of is what happens to the whistleblowers, because there's always a reprisal. So the fact that I totally understand the fact that they've come clean, that you have to say, I mean, it's trying to control the temper here about the people that have stifled this coming out, because those people are hindering the progression of the entire human race for greed, insecurity, and power. And this is obviously happened globally before, as we know, but they've scared someone who's given their life to the service of others, and to trying to help others heal. And this poor guy is now terrified because he's going to have that hanging over him his entire life.
That's what I feel.
His entire life.
It's like, is it sword of Damocles kind of hanging over them for the whole life, looking over their shoulder? Is someone going to get me because I said something wrong? That I don't know what it'd be like living day in, day out, like with that on your mind.
The question is, I suppose, that one thing I'd ask you from the documentary was, were the military personnel in the hospital who took away the X-rays, were they US military? Because in the accounts I've heard of the story, it was the Brazilian military dealing with it, and then all of a sudden the US agencies or soldiers or whoever they were turned up and completely took over.
Yeah, no, that's completely what I heard is that US were basically got into Brazilian airspace without authorization, and they were there. USAF were there, and they used the Brazilian local army to basically get the beings to this base where the US took over and took it back to America. And what happened then, we don't know. But essentially, the Brazilian army were used on, but I imagine they were commanded by the US to do that. They were definitely involved. There was only one military person in the film that actually spoke, and that was towards the end, and that was also quite an important part where you got to see the level of fear of reprisal for coming out, and I guess everything there. And that was another thing that James Fox noted as being one of the most poignant moments for him in the whole thing of meeting this guy. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from it isn't necessarily any evidence per se, it's the stories, it's the human stories, because I think for us to break through the stigma, we're going to have to show the world that are still carrying that stigma, that think that whoever believes in UFOs is well, let's not go down that road, but They
Do you
need to
think
see
it's
the
still
human
there though? Do
effects.
you
They need to
think
see the human.
I mean, we our perception of that mentality has been defined by, you know, the humor around it and the lampooning of people that have embraced that. But what you've described in some of these witnesses is a whole nother level. That's a level of terror over reprisals that you just don't get, you know, you just don't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
That fear, I mean, it's almost like, you know, you'd see from a mafia informant.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is. I
because
mean, it is basically it's above the mafia in some respects, you know.
yeah, I mean, it just begs the question of what sociopaths have been responsible for covering this up, because that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a type of narcissistic authority that is clearly getting off on the power attached to this, but it's
Yeah.
just compounded bad decision making
To
over
be devil's
decades.
advocate, though, and this is a thought that I don't know if it'll resonate with you at all, but I feel like there is definitely that level of going back to post Roswell. But I wonder if there's also an aspect of this is fear based again.
Yeah,
Instead of it being a mental an emotion of greed and power and control, it's actually a fear. And what's the fear of? Population collapse, based on the knowledge that we're not alone. Given that, you know, with the whole War of the Worlds, Orson Welles thing.
Mm.
I mean, it's a whole mixture of stuff that's going on. I think there's a whole mixture of consciousnesses going on. There is greed. There is definitely that, but I think there's also fear of the repercussions of it as well. And that's driving some people to maybe do things which we would call, you know, psychopathic or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the older I get, the more I subscribe to the work of the psychologist Carl Jung.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole principle of, you know, this collective unconscious. And this collective unconscious is a series of competing voices that every human being gets from the moment they're born until the moment they die, which is serving to program their perception of reality. And there was no clearer example than, you know, the fact the past 75 years we've been encouraging each other to laugh at people about the principle of little green men from outer space. That's the clearest example, but unfortunately this is translating into, you know, programming us to act with certain behaviors, and there's no clearer sign of that taking place than the bloody military. You know, and so bad decision making and bad orders that have been given for decades still being perpetuated, and it's really not doing us any good. Yeah. So I think this programming is still there, and unfortunately it's still having an effect on all of this. And it's a question of how do you get people to break out of it? I mean, it's that old expression, you know, well, you think outside the box. Well, you can't think outside of the box if you don't know if you're in one in the first place. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem with current society, is so all the things that the C5 community, the Rama community, and, you know, consciousness, HICE, all over are experiencing and experimenting with. The rest of the population has no clue. And again, it would be it's. I don't want to say that it's put down, but there's there's an overriding programming which people are embracing rather than actually trying to explore this for themselves and think about it for themselves.
But the good news is that the younger generation are less programmed and are probably more open to this topic. So maybe it's only a matter of time for that programming to wear off.
So what are your feelings about the Moments of Contact then? Sounds like it's definitely worth seeing.
I'd definitely see it, if not just for the kind of getting an understanding of the emotion of the people that were involved in it, and the effects it had on their lives, and also the number of witnesses involved gives you clear indication that this isn't a made-up thing. It's definitely not made up. Something happened that day.
Yeah.
So
1996, wasn't it? Was it 1996?
1996, that's right, yeah. So not that long ago, relatively speaking, and think that's also a good thing. Although it's kind of on the brink between being recent enough that people are still alive, but is also old enough that the naysayers and talk CGI and all these things might, you know, I guess there isn't any video evidence, but if anything comes out and it's all on, like, it's coming from a VHS tape, I don't know whether they can still say CGI. Let's see, that's for another day. But
I
right
mean,
now,
the things that have come out of Brazil, I mean, the thing that amazes me most, though, I mean, although I remember reading about the Varginha incident years and years ago, and it was the sincerity behind some of the witness statements that was just completely convincing. Because these people were terrified, and all the signs about, you know, the potential for the US military turning up, carting everything away, was such a familiar story. It just made sense. But there was an incident in South America that I cannot for the life of me understand why the entire contact community hasn't picked up on it, because it's so much more profound. I think it was about 1993. There was a total eclipse of the sun over Mexico City, okay? And this was obviously a huge event. This was an Aztec prophecy. And the Aztec prophecy was, they pinpointed exactly with their calendar this total eclipse of the sun in 1993. And the prophecy stated categorically, there will be an eclipse of the sun, and at that point and afterwards, the masters of the stars will return. The kind of things that we've seen in CE5 popped up in a massive, massive display. Millions of people saw this in the skies over Mexico City that fulfilled an Aztec prophecy. And there are hundreds of hours somewhere of camcorder footage. Now, I remember seeing all of this at a UFO conference in Sheffield in 1995. And this whole incident it's almost like, you know, it's dissipated from our collective understanding when there's massive evidence over it. And the fact that was an Aztec prophecy as well. And this is it. I mean, I don't know whether anyone's looked into any more further information surrounding it. And when we say Aztec prophecy, it's important to qualify that. Has that come from primary evidence from a descendant of the Aztecs, a story that's been passed down for generations, or was it inscribed on the wall of a temple somewhere? That, you know, that bit is a little bit hazy, so I'm not exactly sure, but it was just the footage that was emerging. This was broad daylight. It was like there was you know, it was like being able to see a nighttime star constellation, but it was in the sky in broad daylight. You could see all these dots, and they were clearly moving around all over the place. And yeah, at the time, this was 1985, they swore in blind that there were several hundred hours of footage there. So that kind of thing, you can't, you know, unless you go and you manually steal those tapes and you destroy that footage, you can't really cover that up. But something like this, when you've got a really credible witness, specifically a doctor or any other medical staff who don't lie to people for a living, who are there because they've got the pillars of the community and they've got integrity. When those people get threatened, it's a different story. But yeah, well, it would seem like there's more to come where the Varginha incident is concerned. I do hope that comes out. But I just find myself with all these stories, it just makes me so angry about the role of the military, the intelligence community, or whoever these other sub-agencies are. They have no right to do this, no right whatsoever. And every time I hear this, it makes me start to think, you know, someone needs to do a Greta Thunberg on these military and intelligence community types, and you know, set in course a chain of events that strips these people of pensions. You know, I would like to see these people stripped of their pensions. You know?
Well,
anyway, I'll get off the high horse.
It's I think we need to try and move forward as best we can with as much forgiveness and peace and love. But I know what you mean.
Absolutely.
I know what you mean. There is a growing frustration out there and anger of the situation we're at. But maybe we'll look back one day and see the unraveling of it all and realize why it had to be so, why it couldn't have come out then.
That would be good. That would be hugely positive, and finally we could start to look at things from their perspective. But you know, the fact of the matter is that they've deemed that only a small number of humans are capable of processing if information. That's just garbage. they had no right to make a decision on behalf of the human
Yeah,
race.
we don't know. Yeah, it's hard to know whether if all this information come out straight after Roswell, whether would be, flying around in UFOs now and meeting other beings, or the world would have collapsed under the weight of whatever they predicted might happen with all these people panicking. And yeah, that's maybe a topic for another day, because it's
huge.
it's something maybe easier to look at once we get a bit more information, because when this comes out, hopefully all the information will be there of the reasons why certain decisions were taken by the intelligence community, and maybe we'll have some sympathy for what happened. But right now, all I can see is hurting and suffering of others and stopping humanity's progress. So I agree, there's a lot of frustration there. Yeah. Before we move on, I wonder if you think there could be something that comes from this, some momentum that gathers beyond the UFO community. And the reason I say that is because there has been a couple of interviews done by, I think, Fox News and CNBC maybe did an interview with James Fox. I think there is some talk about it within the Twitterverse and various other social media platforms. So do you think anything will come of it, or will it just be another one of those things that comes and goes?
Well, I think the problem is that as we said earlier on, that the world is still very hung up on this, the whole principle of sort of legal credibility. I mean, don't forget when we were initially setting up, you were helping, we set up the Southeast London group and everything else, and we spent a lot of time embracing that mindset and that ideology by creating a reporting form that was devised by former police officers to output information that potentially would stand up in a court of law. Quite why we would need that information to stand up in a court of law is a mystery to myself, but it's that whole plausibility. Now, that the issue is here, you've got witnesses that won't come forward. Are they more likely to come forward with mainstream media interviewing them? Well, who knows? I think that the reason they've kept quiet is they're scared of being, of action being taken against them, potentially violent or life-ending action. Could the media protect them from that? Well, what's the net loss? There's so much of this information has come out now. I actually don't think. I think it would, if the intelligence community, military, whoever would attempt to do that, would attempt to kill or threaten a witness, then what they're effectively going to do by doing that is martyr them. So that will then really fan the flames.
Yeah, I think we are at the moment where there's more of a risk to them than to.
Oh yeah. I think it would be the very height of limited intelligence for them to go and take that kind of action. I mean, well, God knows they've proved time and again that they're not very bright, so wouldn't put anything past them. But no, I mean, I think that's the bottom line. Is if the mainstream media decides to get involved and get behind James Fox's work, they're going to have to be prepared to try and protect those witnesses, and they've got to go out of the way to do it. And they've got to really build confidence and trust with those witnesses that they can do that. This is why, I mean, the analogy of the mafia for those in those witnesses' minds is relevant, because they clearly think decades later someone will take them out if they say something. So you've got to get round. That's a huge psychological barrier to overcome first. But I mean, that's if the media think this will sell, and sadly it all boils down to whether or not this is still a saleable news item for these commercial organizations, then they will probably make the effort and make the investment to protect those witnesses. But that's the challenge the world we live in, is a complete fundamental lack of objective journalism. It just doesn't exist anymore. These are all commercial organizations trying to make money. And as a direct result, it negatively impacts the ability to provide objective journalism. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I don't like too much regulation makes things impossible to deal with. Although it protects people's rights, it does make things very difficult to deal with, and it creates a very challenging set of circumstances to run a business or organize this or that or the other. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what can be done where the press is concerned to try and get them to take these witnesses more seriously. You know, I mean, if you talk about really credible witnesses globally, there is no more credible witness than someone like Robert Lazar, who whistle blew on Area 51. And he was terrified. He was shot at and all sorts. And I think he took it to George Knapp, didn't he? First of all. Now he didn't get any protection, but he came through it. So I think it's going to be a question of the community potentially, as and when these witnesses pop up, is to serve them examples and say, look, actually, you will come through this. You will come out the other side. Don't be scared. Please, 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 just come and tell your story. Yeah, but I think the thing for James Fox is he can't provide anything like this sort of, you know, legally admissible evidence style that would stand up to scrutiny. So, yeah, I'd like to see there be a change, but I can't see it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. But I think I've heard that some aspects of the film have been shown to various members of Congress in Brazil and in, or whatever equivalent of Congress is Brazil, and also in US Congress, and it has stirred the pot a bit. So,
well, you have to say that new Brazilian president is you know, while this isn't any kind of political comment, he's the man of the people, you know. So the guy that's just come in. So if anybody's going to stand up for their rights, you would hope that the Brazilian government would do the right thing, the honourable thing, and let those witnesses come forward and tell the truth.
Well, let's move on to the C5 side of things, and I think there's some exciting updates. And I think if you wanted to talk about that,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still, obviously, this has been. I mean, I haven't done a huge amount this year. I did so much in years gone by. I've really given a huge amount of myself to the community. But I think that a couple of projects that I'm really keen to finish. I've got an app which comes out soon, and I'm happy to disclose that I have been talking directly to Dr. Greer and his lovely wife, Emily Greer, about the prospects of coming to the UK next year. So we've found a potential conference venue. I won't go public with that yet. And now I'm in the process of collating a load of additional IT costs for him coming over. So I don't want to say this is by no means guaranteed, but at the moment everything's in place that we think we found the right thing. It works for him, and in which case he's going to come over next year. So but there's still a number of details to iron out, and we've got to see if everything is exactly, but there's a hell of a lot of work that's gone into this, something on my side, and a number of people down in and around the conference venue. I've conducted extensive meetings with the conference venue. We've done a lot of due diligence for Dr. Greer, and I'm hoping that he's given a sort of he's made a lot of positive noises that he's going to come over. So we'll see. I've got a final chunk of information to send him, and I'm hoping for a decision over the course of the next fortnight. And then,
right, yeah.
But it's been. I'd really recommend all the C5 communities around the world to. I mean, I know this is a wonderful time in terms of people are, trying to get communities going globally, but I would really encourage them to go back to Dr. Greer, who founded the movement, really, and encourage him to come to that country and talk about it. I mean, we live in this world where you can go and have a virtual meeting anywhere you want, but nothing will ever really replace getting together with a group of people, face to face. Is still the best way to do it. So yeah, so with if everything goes according to plan, hopefully he will be coming over next year. But as I said, it's not signed, sealed, and delivered. It's not guaranteed yet. What is guaranteed is the fact that the app that we've created for the UK community will be out. I'm having heart palpitations at the moment because I've submitted it. It's been submitted to Google for approval. and they take between 5 to 7 days to make a decision. So I thought I would have come through the end of that cycle by about Monday or Tuesday this week, but it's probably going to drag into next week now. But that's fine. You've seen the app, Joe. Honestly, brutally, truthfully, what did you think?
Has it changed much since I saw it?
Same.
Same app. No, it's good. I like the navigation style. And there was useful information on there, and certainly saves on repeating a lot of the same questions you get from newcomers to C5 groups.
Yeah.
So I can see some benefit for it. And if anything, I can see a lot of work's been put into it. I think, we can make it go forward. I'm sure, like with all apps, there's probably things that could be ironed out or stuff with it moving forward.
Absolutely.
But as from what I saw, you look like a good step forward, and
it's just been designed as a tool for the UK community. It's got a ton of content in there. It's got a ton of meditations and protocols and links to.
But I mean, ultimately, it's the whole C5 community, not just UK, right? I mean, it's downloadable globally if it's on Google.
Yeah, it's starting off as an Android app, which will be on the Google Play Store, and then at the right time, if it generates enough income, then I will fund the release of the iOS version. But I've had to do it.
Paid for app?
Sorry,
is it paid for?
No, not yet. No, I have to fund that separately, and that's probably going to cost at least another £600-700. So I haven't raised any money to do any of this. I paid the initial cost out of my own pocket, and I've developed it all by myself, and I've been very lucky that a couple of people have helped out with sound and meditations and the rest of it. It's not I'm not treating it as an aggressive commercial venture. I won't be marketing the hell out of it. If I get my money back, I'll be very happy, but I didn't do it to make money. I just did it because I felt passionate about it and wanted to create a tool that would help teams in the UK. So, but because this is all self-funded, as I said, I haven't had the cash to create the iOS version. And I haven't had the time to organize a crowdfund or a Kickstarter or anything like that. So because it's not, I'm just trying to go along and only use the money that gets generated by the project. I mean, if it does turn out to be successful, then as you said, we'll iron out the kinks and maybe do a version 2 next year or something. But I think I'd just I'm very open-minded about any feedback. I don't, I really enjoyed I think we all still use Dr. Greer's app, the C5 contact one. It's still a great thing. And this isn't designed to replace that at all. It's just to work alongside it. I'm sure some of the content might not resonate with everybody, but at the end of the day, it was I did almost all of it myself in my spare time. So I've done the best I could.
Well, kudos to you for doing that. So another big thing that's coming out, and we said at the start that it's a big time at the moment. This UFO report that's was due to come out this week, and is it 3 days late now? Will it ever come out?
This is a really tough one. I mean, as I've said before, I'm very, very cynical of all of these people, because even though this is now, gained traction within the Senate and within US politics, we're still dependent on organizations that have been lying to people for 70 years. So I'm purely on that basis. I'm not really inclined to trust any of it. I mean, you've got stories emerging saying that, some senators are saying, yes, we've kept it covered up, and the US military is sitting on crash wreckage, and then nothing comes out again. So until someone has the guts to formally uncover Roswell and expose the military's involvement in the biggest cover-up in human history, then I just don't have a lot of confidence in it. I'm sure that that the NASA study will come back with something. I mean, that's 16 people, isn't it? And that's due to publish next year. So some of these will have an impact, but you only have to look at the tiny abbreviated report they published last time versus, what was the actual redacted full length one, and why was a group of, American politicians deemed to be intellectually capable of processing all of that information versus the rest of the public across the US and the rest of the world. I think this is the thing that jumps out and hits you more than anything else over the course of the past few years, is how the people that are running our countries and our planet are actually the last people in the world that should be processing any information on this topic at all. They are not up to the job intellectually, and that's the part of the problem. So I mean, the fact that there was a secret report, when the thing first came out, whatever it was last year, there was a behind closed doors version and a public version. Well, what the hell makes you so special that you should be looking at the secret version? And I just find the whole thing beggars belief. The problem is it needs to be taken out of the political discussion and elevated so it's not it's nothing to do with that, because politicians will only do stuff if it wins votes. They have got very short-term views and they're very self-serving. This is in the global interest. It is not in the interest of a few self-serving politicians, and the people need access to this information. So I don't have any confidence in this report coming out. I mean, God, no. I mean, I must be coming across like a horribly cynical middle-aged guy, but I mean, I just we've been down this line now for decades, and the wrong people are making the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
So I the only thing I have confidence in is that will continue.
Yeah, I think it will continue. But a good question was posed on the Need to Know podcast, which I'd recommend if you haven't got that already. And that was that, is this a moment like in, I think it was the 50s, early 60s, when there was Congress hearings on the topic. There was a lot of momentum on the planet about this topic, and then suddenly there was the Condon report, and the whole thing just got completely changed. And there was the whole kind of, you're a conspiracy theorist if you talk about UFOs, and they managed to completely derail the whole thing, and the momentum went.
Yeah,
could that happen again? Could that happen again? Are we at another crux point?
Well, I mean, so much of the bottom line is that what is the one thing that is linked to the global economy? We live in a world that is driven by the acquisition of wealth. What is central and vital to that whole global economic system?
Oh, people.
And it's the production and manufacture of fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, or as Dr. Greer calls it, the petrodollar. So in the 1950s, it was critically important that system carried on. Now, with the fuel crisis, everything going on in Ukraine, I think more people than ever now are looking at how they can break away from that system of paying for energy. So if that is the case, and more people are, then you'd have to say there's already a movement that's now really starting to gain momentum. That it's very, very appealing, the idea of going off grid. Do I want to pay the electricity companies? No. Do I want to explore putting wind turbines and solar panels on the roof and being completely sustainable for my energy requirements? Absolutely. So I think that is unfortunately part of this conversation. And I think the reasons behind the cover-up are driven in part by money. And the fact is, these things popping up in Earth orbit and making fighter pilots look like a bunch of, Sunday school teachers in the air are allegedly not powered by anything like a combustion engine.
So no offense to Sunday school teachers.
Sorry?
No offense to Sunday school teachers.
Sunday school teachers.
But
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it was a good little segue into the film that Doctor Weir is coming out with soon, The Lost Century, which looks
Mm,
pretty compelling. Another thing I'd
yeah.
recommend to watch when it comes out. And I think that, going back to you were saying about fossil fuels, it looks like, again, that everything's tied together. If
Mm,
there is truth to this same complex that have been covering up UFOs, to also simultaneously be covering up any technology that could have broken us away from fossil fuels into free energy, anti-gravity propulsion, and all this. If that is true, that'd be more angry. I'll be more angry about that, actually, because um it just seems like that is directly involved in causing suffering to everyone. The amount of suffering caused by, well, the wealth gap and everyone not having access, or the energy issue, and just the cost of living, and there's so much suffering globally caused by that. Well, these these large petrochemical companies that seem to dominate,
mm.
and the greed. Is that a bigger suffering than that's been caused by not telling us the truth on not being alone? It's actually
It's a
something to ponder.
combination, isn't
Is
it,
this?
really?
But they're
I mean,
both equally
yeah,
equally
I
there.
mean,
Mm.
the you know, the frequent consistency of, contactee reports and linking with the environmental message is, it's always been there, this direct link. And I mean, my entry into all of this, as I said before, was through my anthropology degree at university. I went to North America and to Australia. And again, the human beings who claim to have had contact, Native American Indians and the Aborigines, it's exactly the same thing: environmental message, contact message, and it actually is quite difficult to separate the two in a lot of these indigenous cultures.
Mm.
So, you know, and here I see that this is just that on a much bigger scale, really. So, are they trying to bury the contact message because it is linked to the environmental message? You know, I mean, you've
Mm.
got Greta Thunberg calling for global destruction of the capitalist state, um, which is a very difficult principle to sell to the masses because the masses are enjoying the benefits of that. But unfortunately, we live in an extremely unsustainable civilization that's chugging down fuel, toxins and everything else. And we are going to have to change if we want to survive.
So we need to look after the planet, look after oceans, look after
Yeah.
the animals. Yeah, definitely. So moving on to probably what's quite exciting, that we've got an interview coming up, and we're both going to be talking to
Yeah.
the Jim Penniston, who notably touched the craft during that UFO
Rendlesham
incident, which
Forest.
for me, actually, it stands up there with Roswell and now Virginia in terms of how big an incident it was. So
Oh, yeah.
um yeah, it's gonna be interesting to talk to him. I don't know how many interviews he does, so I feel very fortunate that he has
We're really lucky. I mean, the thing is, no, Sergeant, is it Sergeant Major, Sergeant Jim Penniston? He's been through so much. So, I mean, we are really lucky to have this conversation with him. It's the most documented UFO account in military history,
Mm,
allegedly, because it was so up close and personal and over such a high security site that, I mean, it's when I first heard about it, I heard information from I for years and years I went out with this girl that went to school in Woodbridge, and she lived down the road from Rendlesham Forest. And I'll never forget, one of my first experiences was her mum and dad telling me all about the Rendlesham Forest incident. And it was the other people I spoke to about this in the area all said the same thing. Oh, all the US servicemen attached to that patrol were disbanded globally and told not to speak about it again. And that was that. All of the local people in and around the area, that was what they understood had happened.
mm,
So I'm very excited to talk to him. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of question marks about it, but I thought initially, I mean, I made a mistake in as far as I thought that the the Pentreek, is it the Pentreek incident UFO that the MOD's blocked from coming out for like 50 years. You
Mhm.
seen that picture?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
Oh,
It's
Pintree.
up in it's a picture that's been taken up in the Lake District of what looks to be like a really clear as day not pyramid, sorry, UFO, but it's looks like two pyramids bolted together. And in the background, it appears to be a Harrier jump jet. So, and that photo has been classified and won't come up before God knows 2050 or something ridiculous. No, more poor decision making on behalf of our wonderful Ministry of Defence, and I really thought at the time that it was that craft, or it was almost 10 years after Rendlesham, and it was almost looked very similar to the descriptions of the craft they saw, but it's not. So, I mean, I'm fascinated to talk to him. I mean, he's gone through, he had PTSD for a long time. So he's really suffered as a result of his experiences, but he's come out the other side of it. So I'm interested to see how he reflects on it all now, and what how he's come to terms with it in his own mind since then. And this is without giving away the big spoiler at the end that Gary's written in the book about actually what happened when he touched the craft.
Yeah, I mean, so talking about the book, that was interesting. I would like to talk a bit with him about a bit more, try and get a bit more of the emotions and the human aspect. Again, a bit like Virginia in terms of, I feel like the book, as good as it was more of like a sequence of events, and then a list of post-interview commentary and how and a discussion on what the aftermath and everything. But there wasn't. I guess I would like to know a bit more about the effects of the incident on the people during the time. Did they think it was a UFO straight away, or were they um, skeptical? Were they skeptical prior to it? I mean, was there any stigma about it? Any laughing and joking during the time? These are the questions I think I might try and dig into with Jim, and also with the Penniston Code, which you mentioned, which is also fascinating. And if that's all true, that I mean, it sounds like, I mean, it does sound true, but it's also could be called hearsay that he had this code in his head or had written it down years ago and only just surfaced. So we have to trust that that's the case. If it is the case, and then the link between the binary code that came from him touching the craft that went into his head, and to describe it, I'm ask him a bit more about that. But this binary code, how to link that to those coordinates that Gary Osborne talked about, in the Nazca lines and the Pyramid of Giza and the other important places around the world. I would like to know a bit more about how that was done. Fascinating, if true, that this was a message delivered in 1980, knowing that it wouldn't be considered seriously until 2018 or so. And at that moment in time, for somehow it was the right time to analyze it, it seems, in terms of being able to understand it or look into it more, maybe.
Yeah.
I wonder if, I mean, listen to Gary Osborne, all the timing seems to be in the minds of these ET beings who create the binary code and put it on the craft to be, so all seems controlled, but I'm not sure if it is. Is it all random? Was he not meant to touch it, and the binary code wasn't meant to be delivered as a message? It sounds dubious. So I'll try and find out a bit more about that. I think that's it's an interesting topic.
Absolutely right. It's it's it really does need more inquiry, and I mean, after we've spoken to Jim, it might be worth having another conversation with Gary.
Yeah, if we can, yeah, it'd be good to have a conversation with him. I think from his
But-
accent, he's not far from here. He sounds like a Londoner.
Oh, does he? Okay.
I don't know,
Yeah.
or around London.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, talking of really good, really great researchers, I was disappointed to see that one of Greer's original team at Avebury in the 90s has now retired. And I thought that was a terrible shame. But it obviously the politics in the community have driven a lot of people out, which is really bad. I mean, I think it's a problem as a community. We have to try and strive to not be so polarized and be a little bit more philosophical. I mean, at the end of the day, the if you want your answers, you only have to listen to some of the contact group Rama Mission are absolutely adamant. If you want the answer to anything, you just have to sit, meditate, and ask for guidance on that, and you can get the answer to anything. If the whole community did that a little bit more with regard to some of these stories, we might have a much better sense of direction. But yeah.
Cool. Well, I think I'm looking forward to having that interview, and we'll
Yeah, definitely.
I'll see you again then. But thank you for this discussion. It's been really good and really interesting, and also well done on the new app. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about if we do manage to get Dr. Stephen Greer over to the UK.
Yeah, fingers crossed, but hopefully we should have an answer within about 2 weeks.
Perfect. Well,
Brilliant.
thank you.
Thanks, Joe.